Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for Bastet. Bastet is an assassin who is good both in solo lane and jungle. Although when you're new to her, jungle would be the place to learn her. She's a very basic assassin with very hard hitting abilities, and is absolutely great if you're new to the role or even just assassins in general. Build wise, Bastet loves full damage. She does so much damage it's almost criminal, but she's reliant on power scaling to do it, so you really need to get a power heavy build going to get it done. It's more costly than other assassin builds, but Bastet applies her damage so easily and so quickly that she really makes the most out of it. Here's her bruiser build though, in case you want to use that instead. I kinda hate that it works, but hey, it works. Relics wise, it's a bit up in the air. Of course, you need beads in any role, but you can go beads in blink, beads in aegis, or beads in sunder on the bruiser build. That's all up to personal preference. I think going beads in aegis though when you're first starting is a totally fair way to keep things safe. Shard wise, Bastet is actually one of the few who can go claw shard, but the safe bet, as always, is just Horn Shard. Let's get past the disappointment of having to say Horn Shard is the best on this character for the 20th time and get to Bastet's passive. Bastet has built-in lifesteal off of basic attacks and abilities, meaning she will heal off of both her abilities and basic attacks when she hits someone, the amount of lifesteal scaling with your level. When Bastet hits an enemy god, whether it be with a basic attack or ability, she will gain true vision on them for 6 seconds, so they cannot stealth away from her, and if they go over a wall, she'll be able to see them. And you have a lifesteal edge over them for the duration for your fight, making it very hard for enemies to try and outtrade you during a gank. And yes, this lifesteal is what helps her out in the solo lane too, since she has some built-in sustain. Both the lifesteal and the vision help out greatly with Bastet's iconic yet simple burst ability. Bastet leaps forward, dealing damage in a very respectable size AoE upon landing. She gains movement speed for 4 seconds, and at any point during this time, she can reactivate the ability to return back to her original starting point when she casted the ability. This is a super basic ability, which you'll soon see as a common theme with Bastet. This is an excellent tool to engage on ganks, or if you're a blink user, an excellent tool to catch back up to enemies after they use their movement abilities in response to your presence. First off, just because you can leap back doesn't mean that you can leap back. As soon as you leap in, the entire earth is going to leap on you and try to get some hard CC on you so you won't be able to leap back, particularly when it comes to cripples. So don't overstay your welcome after you leap in if things are a little too hot, like during a late game teamfight. Leap in, do what you need to do, and leap back out. There's also a mind game here where you simply allow the enemy team to try and play around you leaping back, only for you to press on forward. This is especially good in smaller fights like 2v2s and 3v3s, where one enemy will stay on you and the other will go towards your original casting location, in order to try and catch back up to you when you leap back. So what you can do instead is when you see an enemy doing this, is simply start walking as far away as you can from the original leap location and try to punish the enemy for trying to punish you. Sometimes you leap back, and other times you don't. Try to mix it up and keep the enemy team on their toes. Speaking of which, never forget about that bonus movement speed either. Bastet's basic attack chain is weird, but sometimes just running people down with basic attacks and that movement speed is the best thing you can do so you can keep your other abilities in reserve and try to have the enemy team overcommit on you, especially if you're able to bait out an enemy's relics like a beads or an aegis. Then once those relics end, you have free reign to use your other abilities, with abilities like your second ability. Bastet deals damage to all enemies in a short cone AoE in front of her and applies damage over time. And that's kinda it. This ability does its damage over the course of 2 seconds, ample time to make use of your movement speed from your first ability to connect this ability. So now what you can do is leap, basic attacks until they get out of range, then 2 while walking forward to get back into melee range to continue basic attack. This ability does a lot of damage, and given that this is your only multi-target hitting ability other than your first ability, it's your go-to for just about anything, like clearing waves for your jungle, following up off of CC, and so on. Other than poke and CC of course, which is what her third ability is for. Bastet fires out a cat. Yes, really, and it will root and damage the first enemy it hits. Then it will begin attacking the closest enemy, prioritizing gods, and this ability cannot be used over walls. This cat only takes 3 instances of damage before death. However, every successful basic attack will slow the affected enemy. Another extremely simple ability. Now, like with most assassins, you have to be mindful of your toolset and not just use this ability too early or too late. Now you can blink, 3, and then try to force out a movement ability by using your 2 and basic attacks. Then use your 1 to chase them down, and use your movement speed for even more basic attacks. And they basically have to use a movement ability to get away from you, since this ability both roots and slows them, making it easy for Bastet to apply her second ability and chase down with her basic attacks. Although, it can be very easy to have this be a dud if you accidentally hit a minion. Since the cat kinda roots itself when you hit an enemy, it almost certainly won't be able to catch up to your intended target to slow them for you, so make sure you engage on your targets with a clear line of sight first. But even if you don't have access to blink, it's still very easy just to 3 at range and leap on your opponents, forcing out their movement ability, and then you use your movement speed to get back in range to 2, or even use your ultimate. Bastet fires out her whip, I think, as a long-range projectile, summoning a big cat, and this projectile goes through all minions and walls but stops on the first enemy god hit. Then, the god is stunned and damaged, and finally the god is hilariously picked up and brought to the original casting location. Once the god arrives at the original casting location, a sand pit is spawned underneath them, slowing, pulling, and dealing damage over time to them. This is a very loaded ability, in part to make up for Bastet's simplicity, but this ability too is rather simple at the end of the day. I think using this during ganks needs a little explanation. Simply use your core kit to deal as much damage as possible, and then fire this ability at your intended target to finish them off, pummeling them with basic attacks and whatever you've got left. So instead, let's focus on how you want to use this in teamfights. It's the perfect beads burner, and if your intended target has no access to beads or a CC immune ultimate, they are 100% dead to this ability. Because not only does the ability itself do a million billion damage, it brings them right back to Bastet, but more importantly Bastet's team so they can demolish them. Again, part of why Bruiser Bastet works well too. First things first though is that casting time. Boy howdy is it long. This, along with the very loud sound cue, gives the enemy team ample time to spot you out and try and avoid or body block the ultimate. Body blocking is definitely the hardest thing to deal with this ability, at least after you get used to that very long casting time so you don't accidentally move your camera as you're about to fire the ultimate. Done that a couple hundred times myself. If you haven't already noticed, going in with your core kit in a late game teamfight is not the play. You really are bound to having a good ultimate in the late game or simply not having a late game presence at all. So while you can look for good opportunities to dive on the backline, what you really should be doing is looking for a good opportunity to ult an important target like a hunter or a mage, or use the ultimate on an assassin or warrior as they dive your team for some extra peel, so you can have some real impact on the fight, then use your core kit to clean up the fight after you've already used it. Speaking of your core kit, some combos with Bastet. 1, 3, 2 basic attacks. 3, 1, 2 basic attacks. Then you can add blink to either of these. Blink 3, 1, 2 basic attacks, or blink 1, 3, 2 basic attacks. 1, 3, 2 ult as they retreat. Ult 2 and basic attack, only using your 1 or 3 to catch back up to them, since your basic attacks do more damage than those abilities, and those abilities take too much time to cast. For ability leveling, you want your 2 at level 1, your 1 at level 2, and your 3 at level 3. From there you max your 2, your 1, then your 3, leveling the ultimate whenever you can. Bastet is a brutally simple assassin in SMITE, making her perfect for beginners to the jungle role or as a backup for people who get filled into the role but don't main it. And a really unique soul laner too if you're bored of all the warriors, which I can't blame you. That said, if you're already a seasoned jungler player, you can probably skip Bastet. There's nothing here you haven't seen before. A core kit that's great for killing people in the early and mid game, and an ultimate that's just good enough to make her relevant in the late game. If that doesn't sound like the blueprint for an assassin, I don't know what is. She, like other assassins, is countered heavily by cripples and excessive hard CC, but even in terms of counters and weaknesses, Bastet isn't very interesting either, as there's no single form of CC or a single character that hard counters her. At least apart from the obvious ones like RTO or Nox, which counter every single assassin in the game. So maybe she's not the safest pick possible, but she is one that's harder to counterpick against both item and god-wise, since she just kinda does damage and has a crazy form of CC on her ultimate. So if you're not looking to be wowed by a character and just want an easy to understand assassin to get into jungling, Bastet's the perfect pick. I'm sure there's plenty of little interactions I could have gone over with Bastet, but she's such a simple character I didn't want to bloat this guide up unnecessarily to get a longer runtime out of it. Kinda like what I'm doing now. So I'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.